Welcome to the Journos on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. I'm Peter Martin, Hugh McDonald, Graham McGarry and Alison McConnell here with me on the show. Delighted to have your company. If you're enjoying our content, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. You can come and join the football family, and if you want all that breaking news and all the content at your fingertips, you can download the app as well in the App Store and on Google Play. So now that I've done all the promo, might as well say, great to have you all with me. Hugh, sometimes in life you have to admit that you just didn't get an argument right and you got it wrong, and I have to give Ali a bottle of expensive white wine because Kieran Tierney didn't trap at Celtic. And it brings me nicely to the fact that we will obviously talk about that transfer window. But
gosh, I'd forgotten about that as well.
Yeah, so you had.
If we're going to have a show about me getting things wrong, it's going to be a Netflix series.
Yes.
Maybe like The Wire, stretched to 5 series where, obviously...
Is Tierney indicative of what's going on behind the scenes at Celtic?
Well, the problem with what's going on behind the scenes at Celtic is we just don't know. There's no kind of transparency like in the old days that you would get a nod, a wink. If somebody said to me, "Can you talk conclusively and with great authority on what happens behind the scenes at Celtic?" I can't, because I have no insight to that. What I can do is piece things together from other sources. The Tierney thing was down to Arteta and Arsenal playing hard ball and saying, well, if he goes, the wages are on you. So that was going to be a significant outlay. So there'll have to be negotiations about that. And negotiations, I know from the Arsenal end, they say didn't get very far at all. You only had to look at Mr. Tierney's face sitting on the substitute bench the other day there. So he's going to just tread water for 6 months, I would imagine. Be a squad player at best.
And Graham, he's one of a number of players and deals that were done or not done that suddenly you have to, and we'll kind of broaden this out to the overall transfer window because I know you've written a piece on it, but at times now with Brendan, you have to, the best part of the press conference is reading between the lines, not actually what comes out of his mouth.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was at the press conference yesterday, and compared to his first time around, when, if you remember, he had a bit of a, a massive fight with the board, let's face it, publicly about the kind of lack of support in the transfer market. Yesterday, it was like he was a Zen master coming in and everything was fine, and even though 24 hours before he'd said, no, we must get a striker in, he didn't get his striker, but publicly he was saying, I'm not going to kill my joy over it. And I think 6 years ago, it would have been a real different story, but I think you can tell, if you read the actual transcript, you can see the little pointed reminders that he's making to the board about the lack of ambition, the lack of support, that he feels he wants to take Celtic to the next level and maybe he isn't getting it. And I think you can totally tell that even though on the surface everything seems absolutely fine, that kind of internal struggle that he's always had with Celtic board, no matter who's been on it, is still ongoing, absolutely.
This is probably a slight defence of the situation, Alison, but does he really need to get upset? Because for me, the remit is come back, get them to a knockout stage, goal achieved. They won't beat Bayern Munich, so is there any great need to spend any money? They're so far ahead in the league. Celtic could effectively win this with something to spare and bank the money from the 2 games against Bayern Munich and then reassess things in the summer.
I think that's clearly how the board have looked at it. I think you have 2 issues. You have how the board have assessed it and how the manager has assessed it. Clearly, I think if you're looking at it rationally, Celtic aren't going to get beyond Bayern Munich in the Champions League, regardless of who they might have signed in the January transfer window. They've reached their ceiling in Europe this season. That's not a lack of ambition. I think that's just a realistic assessment of where they are. In terms of the league, they have a very commanding gap at the top of the table. There's no one sitting amongst us here that expects that to dwindle in any significant sense. You can almost say it's a canter towards the league title. It leaves really the Scottish Cup, this season is really maybe where the biggest question mark may lie. So I think you look at the squad, they've brought in another left back, you would say absolutely they have enough now between now and the end of the season. The other aspect is that Brendan made it very, very clear that he wanted another striker and he didn't get it. So you have an obvious question to ask there. The second thing that's maybe pretty important is the fact that Celtic next season have to play Champions League qualifiers. You're not guaranteed immediate access into the group stages, and that is worth a tremendous amount of money. First and foremost, it's worth a lot of kudos to about being in there and staying in there and sustaining what you've built this season. So there's a big question there. Do you now have a problem come the summer where you need to be recruiting someone and they need to come in and they need to hit the ground running? You cannot be scrambling come August in the final days of the window of trying to get someone in when you have the pressure of the qualifier hanging over you.
I would suggest again on that point, Graham, that there's no problem. He's on a hefty wage. This is the remit. Here's what happens. And, you know, as you said, he's coming in with the line, we all know it's a smokescreen.
Yeah.
So, Brendan, you're well paid. Get on with it. You've got 18 months left in your deal. You've achieved the remit, which is basically get a knockout match. There's a ceiling to the ambition of Celtic, and that narrative has, you know, basically been put out there, and Celtic fans have accepted it. So get on with it. I don't see any problem. I see him just sauntering on to the summer, gets a few signings in, and, you know, hopefully for him, he gets by the qualifier. I don't see anything other than, you said, the conflict of what had happened before, but now all the ceiling, all the whole, narrative about what Celtic are about now is in place. So take your money, do your job, beat the opposition. And the opposition, by the way, Graham, is a club that for the next couple of years, if you listen to Philippe Clement, is young players and ducking and diving in the transfer market.
Yeah, but I think that's another age-old question that we've always kind of asked about Celtic ever since, you know, the financial implosion at Rangers, is that they've always just been happy to be a wee bit ahead of Rangers. And I think the Celtic fans find that really quite difficult to deal with. They want to see the club trying to strive for more in Europe. Now, listen, they have done well in Europe this year, absolutely accept that. But I think from the fans' point of view, they want to see the club operating, not worrying about what Rangers are doing, because I think they're so far ahead of Rangers now on the park and financially that it will be years before Rangers catch up, if at all. So they've got to show a wee bit more ambition in Europe. That'd be the fans' point of view. What I would say, though, in defence of, you know, what you're saying there, Peter, is that actually Celtic have spent a lot of money. You know, the last 3 transfer windows, I think, they've broken their long-standing transfer record. So if you look at it, you've got Jota came in, then you had Engels and Ida. That's all been big money, and they've broken their record consistently over that period. So the board
could I write that off against sales?
Yeah, of course, yeah. But I mean, obviously the counterpoint is they've got all this money under the bed. You know, the fans want to see on the pitch.
Yeah.
But I think the Celtic board will rightly say we're not going to be held over a barrel for a striker when Jota's come in. Obviously, Maeda being suspended for the Bayern Munich match has caused an issue. But I think going forward, they're going to have Jota, they're going to have Maeda, they're going to have Kuhn, and they've got back up there as well. So I think Maeda will probably go central, Jota will go on the left, and the board will say what you're moaning about.
I think all the remit has been achieved here.
It has, but I've got, I mean, if you talked about concerns, my concern would be not getting somebody in for August. I really, you know, would say if you're getting a centre forward and get them in 6 months before you have to worry about the bigger concern I have is the way that the transfer policy is working. I don't see a strategy. Now, before, when Peter Law was in charge and you had Mark Lawley's son there and under Angie, for example, it was a clear strategy. Now, it attracted a lot of criticism because it was a bit hit and miss. But the strategy seemed to be, we'll buy young, when we're buying young, going to buy players that have represented their country under 23 nats, there's a bit of quality of them, and we'll get them for 10, 15 grand a week. And if they do really well, we either sell them or we bump their wages up.
Has that drastically changed for you?
I think absolutely, yeah.
Where?
Well, I mean,
Jeffrey Schlupp's 32.
That's what I'm saying.
He's only a loan signing.
That's what I'm saying, but that's completely different from buying a 23-year-old under 20, an under 23 Danish international. You're higher than a 32-year-old Premier League player. Now, there's good aspects to both, but it's not a strategy. If you're going for a centre forward, before, if you were working for the Fenway Group or you were working, for Bournemouth or something like that, they would say, well, what we're looking for is a young striker that we can develop and sell on. And we're now willing to pay good money. We've now moved from the 2 million from O to 10, 11 million. But it's a bit scattergun if you're going for Wiesgarden, right, who fills that billet, and your backup is Ian Acho and Danny Ings. Yeah. You say to yourself, well, that has the sort of feel to me that you're just sort of plucking names out of a hat. You're going in the agents and saying, who have you got available?
Yeah. I thought the most obvious the deviation from that was actually last January when Celtic brought in Ida. Now, they brought him in on the loan deal, but without a clause that said, if you do well, here's the buyout clause, we'll pay 4.5, we'll pay 5. And what it did, it left them wide open when it came to the summer, and it was very clear that they wanted to come to get him back in, and it had worked for them, that you're over a barrel because you're paying top dollar. That wouldn't have happened before. There would have been a clause in the contract. Absolutely. It would not have happened.
If there's anybody had any idea that Peter Lawwell was running a transfer business, that was the one.
Absolutely.
Imagine Lawwell saying to Norwich, right, we'll take your player, we'll pay his wages, we'll make him a better player, and then when we make him a better player, we'll pay the premium.
Yeah.
Mad.
Yeah, that was the first sign for me that there was a really significant deviation from the way that Celtic were working. But I also thought too, what was very notable about this window was that everyone knew Kyogo wanted to go in the summer. Everybody knew that Kyogo was keen to leave and go on. There was an increasing inevitability about him going in January. As Rodgers came out and said, he's not been happy for some time. He wanted to go. He made it clear he wanted to go. So you've had 6 months to sit and say, we have to have a plan in place. You have to source another striker. Here's your 5 options. Go through them and get one of them.
That was the biggest surprise to me, because when I was listening to Brendan Rodgers over the weekend as the clock ticks, I thought he sounded pretty confident about getting one.
He sounded very confident if on Sunday,
And I thought to myself,
it's in the bag.
I said, they've got somebody in the bag. It's just crossing it, just crossing the T's here.
Yeah, even went as far to say it will be a loan. That was more than likely that will be a loan now because of where we are. But it gave you the impression that they had somebody lined up.
What about the other deals? I mean, I know you obviously look at the transfer window and all the hype that used to be associated with it.
Yeah.
I've never associated that hype with Scotland. I've always looked at it as a as they call it, the Jim White yellow tie, trying to make things sound exciting in the English Premier League because they're vast amounts of money. Up here, I mean, we talk about it from a bygone era of basically being, maybe 12 o'clock, a late signing comes in, a Barry Ferguson, a Robbie Keane, a Craig Bellamy, but. I mean, I just think...
a long time since
that's a long time, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, as part of, we're trying to do a couple of wee different things with our coverage, and as part of deadline day, they had me looking at Sky Sports News for the duration of the day and doing a piece on it and what I kind of found and how I enjoyed it, and I didn't enjoy it at all. Let me just let you in the secret. But,
you have to watch it all day.
No, I could have dipped in and out, but I was unfortunate enough to catch guys like Jamie O'Hara and Jen Beattie was sitting next to him thinking, what have I done in a previous life to deserve this, And it was just, they're trying to make something out of nothing, it was like, it's just... The biggest drama of the day was Matthias Tell, if he was coming to Tottenham or if he wasn't. But it wasn't if he was coming or not, it was, is it going to be a loan or a loan with an option to buy? And that went on for like 12 hours and it was just, terrible. And then now and again you would get a wee snippet for Scotland. Oh, and by the way, Ross County have got such and such on loan from Harrogate Town. And you're like, oh, brilliant. Aye. So I think it's looking at lost its lustre a wee bit, I've got to say. And I don't know if it's just because it's a stressful time in our profession, obviously, and it's the most stressful day at the end of a stressful month. But
I think it's such a weird window because no one wants to allow players to go. There's always a domino effect, I think, in the window, even in the summer. But it's really notable in a short burst across a few weeks in January that clubs don't want to allow other players to leave without sourcing a replacement, and I think that's where Celtic get stung.
Yeah,
Danny Ings as
I think
well.
everybody knew they were so desperate for a striker as well. I mean, the manager's out publicly saying it. Kyogo's done it. They know Celtic have got a lot of cash in the bank.
Yeah.
If they did want Chris Garden, for instance, they were going to have to pay top dollar for it. And
you don't have to. You don't have to let everybody know. What you have to do in the background is say, listen, he's going to be sold. We'll go and privately do our business, and phone and say, right, this is the guy we're going to sign. How much do you want? Here it is. Can we have a wee bit of banter on it? And then after that, Kyogo announced, and then other player comes
they could have done it months
without
ago.
having a
Months ago.
circus.
I thought in my naivety,
That was the plan.
My Kieran Tierney delusion, that was my thoughts, and I thought they've got somebody in and they'll wait, because Kyogo has been unhappy. I mean, it's like all these stories always unfold, and you get more detail. We're talking to people, and Kyogo's actually been unhappy, not just during the summer break, but before the end of last season. And so you're saying to yourself, well, and apparently, Brendan was comfortable with that. I mean, it wasn't as if he was going and saying, "Oh, please stay and don't go." I mean, he's been quite vocal about it in press conferences. I thought that was quite a strong line in his press conference the other day when he was addressing. He actually faced up and addressed. Listen, fans might be saying blah 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 about Kyogo, but they don't know what I know.
But he'd highlighted that 3 or 4 weeks prior to it.
Yeah, but he was strong yesterday saying to the fans, "No, okay, just wait a minute here. It wasn't as straightforward as you think."
Yeah.
I just look at it and say, what's got to happen is that the board and manager, the whole departments in there have got to be aligned and have a transfer. They have to have a fully functioning recruitment department, because they're now getting into a stage of, they're a big club. They're a club that's dealing in, 10 million, 11 million transfers in, dealing in 25 million transfers out. This is serious stuff.
What I would say is that a name that's not really been mentioned in all this is Paul Tidsdale, who was brought in during the summer. Actually, it wasn't announced till a wee bit after, but he's been working there for ages.
Yeah.
If there's not a plan there, what is he doing? This is the thing. And
I don't believe that there is. I don't buy into. I'm disagreeing with you. I think there is a plan. I think there's a strategy. I think there's a plan that they go through, and I don't think it's deviated too much from the plans of previous windows. The only change is the person who's doing the deals. I think the difference this time around is Brendan's bought into it. Brendan has to buy into it. He's been brought back. He's been in the movie before, and he's just sitting saying, "I'm going to take my money. I've done the job.
Here's what I would say.
I've got the
Here's what I would say though.
Totally.
I think he's moved it up. I think he's bought into the theory. But what he wanted to do was move the kind of envelope. So he wanted it to go from the £3 million experiments to an £11 million sure thing, which he thought he was getting with Arnie Engels.
Yes.
So that's where he's tried to move the club. So there is that strategy still in place to get a player and develop him and
He's
move him on.
He's
He
not
just wants
wanting
to bring it
to
up to a different
launder
Can't help
dirty washing.
himself. He can't help himself to give a thinly veiled swipe. You can read between the lines on it, but believe me, the second time around, he's bought into it. He's got his money.
It seems more settled. I've got to
He
say,
only
yeah.
has. He would have absolutely gone tonto first time around on this. Now he's bought into the plan. He's well paid. What was the remit? Get to the knockout. There's the knockout. I want the striker. Didn't get him. Listen, there's no point in me actually having a go here, because here's the strategy.
The only thing I would say is yesterday we were sitting listening to Brendan trying to talk up Johnny Kenny as being, a suitable alternative for the Bayern Munich game.
Yeah.
A guy who, I've no noticed harm with Johnny Kenny. He did well for Shamrock Rovers. He did well in the Europa League, Conference League this season. But come on, this is Celtic. We're talking about playing Bayern Munich, and the only guy they've got on the bench that can actually play. If let's say Ida, Roger said he's not going to wrap him in cotton wool, so he could play him tonight. He could play him. I don't know how he'll play him. I don't think he'll play him on Saturday against Wraith Rovers, but. What if he gets injured? Johnny Kenny's going to lead the line for Celtic against Bayern Munich.
See, this is what I think about signing. Pierre, you're saying he's buying into signs, but Brendan's targets are completely at odds with what was Celtic's strategy. Completely at odds. Yeah. You just have to look at the guys he signed. He signs guys, and by the way, I'm not complaining about this. I'm just saying, Brendan basically wants an English Premier League player, right? He wants him at 24, 25. Like Ida falls into that. Kuhn fit into it. Schmeichel falls into it.
Engels.
Tierney falls into it. Engels falls into it. Schlupp falls in it. Iheanacho would have fell into it. Danny Ings would have been in it. The strategy before was by South Koreans, Japanese, Danes, whatever, Swedes,
from an unknown
Polish
market.
people.
Listen, Hugh, I get that. All I'm saying to you is they're so far ahead in the league. They've got a really good chance as favourites to win the cup. And his remit when he was brought back, get them to a knockout
Oh,
stage.
I agree with you and all that.
He's done it. There is no need to throw a strop. He professionally, because as a manager, you do want to try and take yourself onto that next level. You do want to. He cannot, because of the nature of the person he is, even although he's well paid and he knows he's reached the ceiling point with Celtic, there's no point in throwing a strop. No. There's no point. He can just do the odd wee thinly veiled, by the way, I can't resist. Here is my line. See if you can read between it. But the remit has been reached. Get them to a knockout. And if you get the players, you get the players. He's probably said to himself, my God, I've been in this movie before. I'm pissed off. But I'm not going to say anything now because it's out comes the narrative.
I think he's maybe experience has maybe given him that, you know. But
yeah,
I think
absolutely.
you tried to justify yesterday. We did obviously ask him. You must be quite, you know, put out by this because you've said publicly you want a striker, he didn't get it, and now you're getting in quite short-handed for a big game. But he was just saying, well, listen, my management style is I'm a motivator, and I can't come in here with a hump. Yeah. And it just transmits to other people.
I think
the explanation behind it.
I
But
think there's little
think,
to be.
Sorry, Alison, I was just going to say, I do think under the surface, I think he is annoyed.
Yeah,
absolutely. But you know, no point. You know, and I wonder about the other. You mentioned, and I don't want to dwell too much on Celtic. I want to, you know, kind of broaden the horizon on it. But you look at the other clubs and what they're trying to do. Who do you think is the best window in Scotland?
I think Aberdeen had an interesting window.
Yeah,
but time will tell if it was a good window or not. But yeah, I think they're the ones who I would look at and go, yeah, they could really bring players in that might have an impact there.
Yeah, I watched them on Saturday, Hugh. They're a sorry sight. They lack creativity. There's no fight in them. And the strange thing about it is, at the end of the game, I mean, they didn't look like scoring. They just lacked invention. And I looked around and I saw Willie Miller there, and I looked at him and I thought, Willie Miller just looked at me and thought, what about this mob? You know, and that is it in a nutshell. You know, because the what I put down to it, it's not I'm not going to get down a road of foreign coaches. It's about any coach eventually works out what your style is, and whether we're getting those draws and those 1-0 wins and that great run. They're now not, because the two boys who are the ageing players, he's taken his own star man out of the equation, and he's got Shinnie in there who's in his twilight of his career, and people are pressing them, and they've got no creativity. Keskinen hasn't really got a trick. They've got no creativity that you think to yourself, this is going to get into Papa Gay, or this is going to get in there to Nisbet. Nisbet's been a failure. So there's nothing there that suggests to me that it's going to be this unbelievable surge in the second half. I think Hibs and Hearts can track them down.
I think they can as well. I've been really impressed with the resilience of David Gray and the way he's changed things around there, because remember, this is Scottish football, so last week he was ready for the sack, so this week we're carrying
Manager of the month.
carrying him down the forum with people scattering petals at his feet. So we'll see what we say next week. But he has seemed to have got a bit of resilience in it. But Hearts now, we always suspected Hearts would kick into gear, and they've kicked into it, pretty big time as well. I think Hearts will make a real charge now.
I think they'll finish third.
I think they might. I honestly think they might, because if you look at what they've got in terms of depth of squad and squad itself, they've got the best squad outside Celtic Rangers, so why shouldn't they?
I fancy the two Edinburgh clubs to be.
If you look at the table as well,
fourth, I think.
the points thing's
There's
not.
nothing.
It's not as if this dreadful start has left them adrift.
Which is incredible,
isn't it?
So Aberdeen are still fourth, which is incredible. Do you know what I mean?
It's the nature of the league, though, Kieran, because as you mentioned there, you just sneaked her in there. You think they'll finish third and fourth, would I?
Yeah.
I mean, because I've watched Hibs regularly. I haven't seen Hearts in the last few weeks, but I've watched them in the highlights packages and a couple of full games on the television. But I look at Aberdeen, who are 28 points ahead of Hibs at the 3-3 draw when I was back there at the end of November at Easter Road. And now Hibs are within 2 points of them. That's damning of our league, because everybody out with Celtic and Rangers can beat each other.
Well, I think Aberdeen in the form table have got 2 points from their last 10 games. And the only team that are close to them is St Johnstone with 10. So that shows you the kind of drop off in form. It's been absolutely incredible.
And St Johnstone haven't read the script, Hugh. I mean, I had them dead and buried. They're not dead and buried.
No, I'm going up there on Saturday for the Scottish Cup game. So I did a wee bit of research and talked to a few St Johnstone supporters, historians, etc., before I go up. And the mood up there is, you know, from the very realistic supporters, it would still be a miracle if they pulled out of it. But they are now seeing, you know, Valakari is doing very well with a squad that he's inherited. You know, he didn't, I mean, when you look back and see, for example, the goalkeeping situation at the beginning of the year, St John's was preposterous for a club of that size. So they have a feeling. The new American owner gave a speech to shareholders, and it was really well received, because he was, you know, he seemed to be straight talking about it. We're going to try and do things differently. We're going to blah de blah. So it's really strange for a club that is still somewhat adrift at the bottom of the table. There was a bit of optimism about it, you know. There's a bit of, you know, listen, you know, we might not stay up, but there is a plan, there's a strategy, and this guy, I mean, people are, Valakari's, he's got a good CV. I mean, he's not a novice at this, you know. So it seems a decent appointment. I was going
to say, I saw them at Ibrox, and they get beat 3-1. They were 3-0 down after kind of 10-minute spell. They lost 3 goals. They were a shambles at the back. But Valakari came in after it, and he was very kind of cocksure, you know, and he was saying, no, we're on the right track. We're up the next week. Saw them beat, admittedly, a poor Motherwell side, but you know, that just started to turn. You could see what they were trying to do. You could see what he's trying to do. He took a lot of stick for playing the way he's been playing, and people say you can't come here and you're in a relegation battle and play like that. But I think they've got more than one string to their bow, because they then dug out a result against Motherwell the next week in the league, and they showed that it wasn't all just pretty football and being very open at the back. They had a bit of steel about them. And
I think it'll be interesting.
I think they'll make a fight.
I think it'll be interesting if they win a couple of games. Now the next couple of weeks they're playing all the teams round about them. See if they'd even take one win out of that. I think it'll become really interesting, because then the psychology changes entirely.
And nobody else has put a run together, you know what I mean? This is the thing.
And then that factor.
There's always a free fall club every season, and Dundee are auditioning for that this season.
I must admit, and I firmly buy into the meritocracy of, you know, up and down, but I hope we don't lose the Dundee derby. I mean, the whole city it's just a buzzing city when it comes to the derbies. I wouldn't like to see them go out. I like having those derbies: Hearts, Hibs, Dundee United, and it boosts the whole PR spin that, you know, Neil Doncaster puts out about per head of population.
Just another selling point.
It really is. It's good. It's good to see 4 stands busy. You know, and the excitement of it as well.
The game was brilliant. You know, it was absolutely fantastic.
I'd love to see that. Just closing down on the window. I want to talk to you, Graham, about Motherwell. But just closing down on the window, Rangers and Lyle Cameron, they managed to get from Dundee, and they bought the boy Fernandez as well. They're easily going to finish second. The remit, I think, hopefully, in his mind, for Philippe Clement is to try and engineer the. I think they do well in Europe. I think they're a credible team in Europe. But the Scottish Cup, if he can nab that trophy, I think he'll look upon it as, you know, there's a bit of progress again after the League Cup of last season.
I think he'll want something to show for this season. I think he probably needs something to show for this season, and that's the only viable option left. Although when you look at who the 4 teams that they could get now in the Europa League, I think you'd fancy them against any of them. I think you'd fancy them that they could go on and maybe go to the quarterfinals, and then you just never know. But yeah, I think clearly in terms of a domestic sense, you want some kind of return. There'll be a demand for some kind of return. I actually thought there was a sort of shift in tone from Clermont across the last couple of weeks when they qualified on Thursday night for the last 8, and obviously there's a few extra quid going in. I think that's worth an extra 2 million or so from what they had already banked. That I thought they might have tried to get maybe one in before the closure of the window. Obviously never managed to do it, but I thought they might have got one more in.
I think, interestingly enough, it didn't come out in the press conference, excuse me, from the weekend, but it did in a post-match in one of the BBC interviews after the game at the weekend. He said, this is the way we have to go for the next couple of years, investing in youth coming onto the park, and there won't be huge, big transfers coming in. Yeah. I think there's two things. I actually think he's starting to get a side that looks settled. That's the first thing. Secondary to that, remember, he's one of another number of managers where everybody said he's getting the bullet. And he's managed to ride that storm out. But I do see a settled look to them at times.
Yeah, I mean, I think, just like Hugh said, 1 week you're the peacock, next you're the feather duster kind of thing. But I think you can't really forget the away form. There was a big win at Dundee United for them, I think. They played well and they deservedly won that game in a tough venue. But you look back to that form in about Christmas time, I think the fixtures recently have been quite kind to him, having a lot of home games. They're brilliant at home, there's no doubt about that. You've got to give him credit for that. But if Celtic win tonight, Rangers are still 13 points behind, and I don't think you can kind of escape that as well, So I think the mood music is changing. I think Rangers they're lurching from Clermont as the answer to Clermont's a diddy and we're ready to get rid of him. That's the kind of, there's no in between.
I still think that's quite tenuous. I still think just now, I think they're going game to game on it.
I feel it just takes one thing and it will switch again.
That's exactly what I think.
Losing everyone's going along nicely now, so say they have a good wee run of form in the league. If you lose in the Scottish Cup, then it's mushroom cloud.
Yeah.
Again, it's.
I know, but I don't. I know Ali thinks it's a game by game. The knee jerk reaction to it, get him out and doesn't know what he's doing. But I look at the European results. I look at the fact that they're in this knockout playoff phase, and I look at the way they've steadied themselves in the league. And I take your point about the home result, but I think reading between the lines again at Rangers, I think the board are just saying, listen, you've got it till the end of the season. You are going to take this all the way.
I mean, if you ask about the board was sitting there praying that they don't have to make any decision. The board, the whole thing about this board, when they sit in conclave, will be saying, please God, we don't have to make a decision about the manager. There is no appetite whatsoever to sack the manager, just none at all. There's not even any background.
But there's no pressure. There's no pressure now for second either, Hugh.
No, but what they've got to do is any pressure to get rid of the man. Even if we finished with nothing this year and 15 points behind Celtic, the board would still be saying, listen, this is not okay, but we've still got a strategy. Let's stick to the strategy. Let's do this. The only pressure on Clermont and the board will come from outside forces. Because, as I say, the board has absolutely no appetite for so many reasons. It's not just that they can't afford to sack him, but they'll look at Clermont and say, in a perfect world, who are we going to get that's better than a manager that won a couple of titles in Belgium and went on to manage Monaco? And in a perfect world, who is this shining guy that can come in here and sprinkle stardust over a situation? And to Clermont's credit, Clermont not just seems, but has accepted what the strategy is. You don't see him coming out and saying, "Oh, we should have got a winger." I think he was kind of half hoping for a winger. He'll not. I think he's been very diplomatic with the board and what he's been expected to do. He had that wee thing. Remember, he had that press conferences. Well, that wasn't what they said,
It's not what I was told at the start.
But after that, he's bowed down to it. I mean, he makes the odd complaint to the world in general, but it's not pressure on the board.
A brilliant line, didn't he? I felt alone in the desert. That's what he said, wasn't it? That was his line. I felt alone in the desert before Patrick Stewart came in. To
be fair, I think that was his reference, because obviously you're front and centre for everything. So if you're turning up at a press conference and we were saying, you know, the roof's falling off this stadium and why are you having what's happening? So you're the guy that has to answer all those kind of questions.
I know exactly how
No
he feels.
sympathise,
I absolutely am.
There's a beau geste of caffeine.
Exactly. I can totally and utterly empathise with this predicament, having meetings with yourself and then wondering if there's anybody helping you. But just on the Motherwell thing, I know you're pretty close to them.
Yeah.
Obviously, they want to get the right man.
Yeah.
I think there's a definite story from Stuart Kettlewell coming out, you know, on his whole thought process. Was it an knee-jerk? Was it too hasty? Is he employable if he can't take the heat of the criticism and the lunacy of some people who are poisonous when it comes to abuse?
Yeah, sad situation. I think Stuart was well liked, and I think, you know, that's in the broad Motherwell fan base. I think people appreciated the job he was doing. There was widespread disgruntlement at the way the team was playing, there's no doubt about that. I said I was at the cup game, took the wee man up there, and at the end of the game, I mean, they'd one sclaffed shot on target against the bottom team in the biggest game of the season, and they let the players know about it. But I didn't think any of the abuse was kind of a personal nature.
Yeah.
I wasn't at the following week when they lost in similar circumstances, and Stuart was up in the stand because he had one of his many bans from the touchline, and apparently some of the abuse from a small kind of section got pretty personal, and his family didn't take to it too well. So I just think, you know, in previous weeks he's looked like a man who doesn't really have the answers, and he looks as if he's kind of thrown a lot of, you know what at the wall and hoping something sticks, and he looks under pressure, and he didn't look particularly well, I've got to say. I think he looked tired and as if he didn't really know where the answers were. And it's crazy.
He's been on a worse run, Graham.
Yeah, 15 games last year, and that's the point I wanted to make, because I think the way the club handled it was quite poor in terms of the overall fan base. There's no excuse for what the kind of individuals did at Perth, if that is what's happened, and it's made Stuart think that he has to quit his job. But the way it was handled made it out as if the whole fan base was abusing his family and making it a really toxic place for him to come and do his work, and that wasn't the case at all. I've been at lots of Motherwell games, and yeah, there's a lot of annoyance with the style of play, but it wasn't to the extent where I would have said, you know, the fans have been really out of order here.
Yeah.
On a broader scale, I'm not talking about the individuals involved at Perth. So, yeah, I think...
They chucked it when they were fifth, Graham. I mean, what is the expectation?
I think, I'm not saying it was calculated, right, but I think in terms of his reputation, chucking it when he was fifth was a great thing for Stuart Kettlewell in the long run, whether it was by design or not, because it's better quitting when you're fifth than getting sacked when you're 10th. And I think all the underlying stats, if you just watch Motherwell for the last 5 or 6 games, it screamed that the trend was a downward one, and I think they're going to be sucked into it no matter who they bring in. I think they'll be sucked into that kind of morass at the bottom of the table.
And who do you think ideally should they be looking for? I mean, I look at the overall... I've asked the question this season because last season when I regularly made a point of going to lots of games out with the Celtic and Rangers to see, you know, from Aberdeen downwards to see the type of football that was playing. I thought the standard last season was absolutely woeful. Yeah. But you know, if you're a Dundee United fan buying a DVD, it's, you know, my 100 greatest throw-ins. You know what I mean? Some of the football this season is not exactly great to watch. You know.
No, I think that was a big issue for Stuart. You know, the football itself. You look at the results and you go, well, it's Motherwell. They've got one of the smallest budgets in the league. What are these guys expecting? And I think the club kind of fed into that. You're entitled here. You know, like, what do you want them to do? But you know, I think in the end, you mentioned the 15-game run that he went on last season where he didn't win a game. He had 1 win in 9 when he quit, just lost twice in a row to the team bottom of the league without putting up any kind of fight at all. And yet there was no bed sheets outside the stadium, there was no protests. I said this in a piece I did, that, you know, I remember when Tommy McLean was the manager and he'd won the Scottish Cup, and less than 2 years later there was protests outside the main stand. Tommy get to, you know, so there was none of that, you know. So from a wider point of view, I don't think there was the kind of outcry that maybe the narrative has been since he quit. I think it's been a wee bit unfair.
Okay, here's a strange one. I thought I'd throw this one in. There's 2 areas that I want to deal with. I'll probably... Let's deal with... I've got people who show emotion, which I think there's a strange situation that happened after they saw Jota getting emotional at the weekend, because some pundits maybe didn't buy into him showing that emotion, and then, as you know, everybody steams in from a different angle on it. And then we'll talk about Ronaldo, because Ronaldo is, for me, you couldn't mark him with a blowtorch. I mean, he's absolutely sensational. So
He's won the Humble Footballer of the Year.
Well, absolutely. I mean, and by the way, I'm going to put a strong defence for him shortly. But he is a boy who I think really annoys the life out of people. We'll talk about him shortly. But just on the emotion thing, I think. I mean, they made too much of it for me, because at the end of the day, whether Aidan McGeady or Chris Boyd, mocked the situation or not, and then people start to look at it, in greater detail and in depth about people showing their emotion. Jota simply scored a goal. It was great for him to be back at a club that he enjoyed and he's valued, and the manager put his arm around him. The fans love him. He's got a song that a girl sang about him on an acoustic guitar. He's back after 18 months of bagging 190 grand a week. Graham,
tough times he told us after the game. We're like, really?
The only thing for Jota for me is I'm crying because I've banked all his money and I've scored a goal. I've actually got to. Yeah, I mean,
listen, I loved it. I thought it was great, and I was crying a little bit myself, because I had to rewrite my whole piece practically when he scored, because it went from being a kind of Daisy Maeda loving to being, oh Jesus, right, Jota's back. But I thought it was great. I don't have any problem with that at all. Showing a bit of emotion. The fans are emotional, and they'll love him even more. It might be a wee bit confected, but at the same time, the fans will lap it up.
You don't want that at the stage. You don't want the stage of it all.
I love that drama in football. I always see, and I don't think, even the top guys in UEFA know it, and I always refer back, Peter, to the Champions League final we were at, and it ended, and one side you had all these Real Madrid fans with their white going, then you had the defiance from the BVB fans just chanting, and the players are going up to them. And some guy in the UEFA puts on Freed from Desire. You can't hear. Okay. You're in a theatre and you can't see the drama. You just got to look. I never saw the game. I just saw the highlights on Sunday. But you see Jota scoring, and he goes, and he is, of course, it's confected in its drama. He goes into the salute. The fans are going mental. You're sitting, you say, that's sport. I mean,
absolutely. And to be fair, and I hate to throw it out to some people of a certain generation who will not remember the original gesture, but he's not exactly under the same pressures as Tommy Smith at the 1960s. when he put his fist up in the air.
Wasn't that wonderful as well? One of the great moments.
Yeah.
That's at a different level, of course.
A last minute clincher at Fir Park.
But it's in the same ballpark of sport, and just you go to games, you see even like if you go to see Bonnie Rose, as I did on Saturday, the celebration because it's 3 vital points against Clyde and the guys are all diving. That's what it's about.
Well, with that in mind, I put the top 5.
Oh, wait a minute.
Top 5, emotional moments that you can think of. And some of them would have come easy to you, but there's 2 that stick in my mind. Obviously, Gazza crying. For that moment of real weakness and pain of a boy who realised, by the way, I could go out of the World Cup final. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I saw that live, I could feel his pain. There was that whole nation suddenly just took him, and it was as if they just wanted to part him and say, it's going to be okay.
Lineker was the one that got me with that.
You need to get him off.
Yeah, I mean, it was painful, but it was a whole nation was behind him. They embraced him for showing the emotion.
It kind of made him a sort of cult hero. Actually, the whole narrative around him changed.
And the other one, Ali, that stuck in my head, and probably not as widely talked about, but it stuck in my head for the pain of football, was Samuel Kafur when Solskjaer scores the winner.
Oh, yeah.
And he
He's-
is distraught.
he's
There's
dead,
no
yeah.
time left. They've lost the European Cup,
Yeah.
and he's lying on his back. And I mean, that for
gone.
me was
Yeah.
that's what sport's about. That is the pain of something that can flip
Oh,
in a
aye.
minute.
Was there not a Man United player cut away from the celebrations to go and
See if he's all
see if
right.
he was
I
all
think
right and
that-
try and pick
yeah.
him up, you know? So that shows you the kind of other
I
side.
think the referee, Kalina, went and started
Kalina,
picking,
that's right, aye,
started picking players up.
Yeah, I mean that for me is that was particularly painful. Obviously, Beckham's farewell at PSG
Yeah.
was one of those situations where I think, you know, regardless of all his fame for things out with it, it was his realisation.
It's the end of the road.
It's the end of the road.
Yeah, I think so, and I think the finality of it is
Is
probably
there any that stick in
the
your
first
mind?
that I
I'm gonna say-
remember. The first one I can remember is Anton Rogan after Celtic lost. I think it was in 1989 Scottish Cup final, and it went. Was it like 11-10 or something?
1990, yeah,
It was in
against Aberdeen.
1990,
yeah,
and he
yeah.
was absolutely devastated at the end of it. He was in
I think
tears.
Andy Murray, when he lost the first Wimbledon final to Federer, and, you know,
That's
I haven't
right.
even got that in there. I mean, I just
that
put
was-
football ones, but that is.
yeah, that was.
Yeah.
And then to come back and then win it the next year. But next year, wasn't it? He won it in
4 weeks
Crying
later,
again. He won the Olympics, yeah. Of
4
course.
weeks later in the same court, he beats Federer in straight sets to win the Olympics,
Yeah.
which was one of the great days of my life. You know,
I
It was
I just felt
did you
that
feel
day.
emotional at that point, Hugh, when you watched him? When he was.
the thing about Murray kind of ruined me in sport, because I actively, when I was writing and reporting of him, I had to give myself a shake, because I was writing a lot of times just as I was so desperate for him to do well, because
Quite close to the
because
camp
you get
as
close
well.
to him.
and-
I'm not saying I wasn't,
Yeah.
but you get around it and you get a sense of who he is.
Yes.
And you get a sense of how he works, and you do a lot of background stuff and that, and you know what he puts into it, and you know how he treats you as some old doddering sports reporter. No, seriously, and he always, even in the worst moments, he always dealt with you with courtesy. Even, I mean, coming off that defeat, you know, we used to get a thing called afters with Andy Murray. So after defeats, there used to be 2 British journalists would go in and get British stuff, which we would use the day after, sort of follow-up stuff. So when he got beat in bad defeats around the world, for some reason they would send me in as a sort of Scottish voice, me and, you know, and whoever else going. And I remember talking to him after that, and it was really... It was really moving, because it's a wee room off the main press conference, so you're jammed up, and you can see the sweat on his, and you know it's still there.
Yeah.
There's bits of grass hanging, his dirty knees. There's that gaunt way that sports people look after 4 hours or whatever it is playing court, and you just say, you want to give him a cuddle, never mind write, you know, a spread on him.
I think it was the moment that the British people actually, I mean, it's easy for us. It was easy for me to like and love Andy Murray as a sportsman, because we already had that type of humour in Kerry Dalglish.
yeah.
So we knew the English people thought, wait a minute, this guy, you know, he could never have a laugh, has he got any emotion, he's
it's like
boring.
a robot, didn't he? Yeah.
You know, and then all of a sudden you think, no, the boy's human. He wants to win.
Oh, he's just quite dry as well. I think.
It's
like,
wonderful.
I like
funny,
it.
it's hilarious.
I like
That's
it.
the guy,
His best moment for me was, and I don't think the English press, in fact, I know the English press never really got him. And a lot of the English press were, by the way, very supportive of him. You know, I'm not making any. But I remember that the Davis Cup, they were all looking for a line, and they said to Leon Smith, the Davis Cup camp, should Andy Murray be knighted for what he's done here today? And Leon's got to play the LTE line. Oh, that's not for me to say, but of course, you know, he gives us that. So Murray came up and said, do you think you should be knighted for this? And Murray says, yeah, I think I should be knighted, and I think Jimmy the physio should be knighted. the hitting partner, the 2 analyst guys, they should be knighted. That. And they all took it, and the back pages were, you know, Murray knight all, you know, Murray wants everybody. And you're just sitting there going,
He's taking the mickey.
kidding.
Yeah, absolutely. Two other moments of crying, obviously in the sense of football, and I'm glad you threw in Andy Murray there, you 2 guys. Is Messi saying goodbye to Barcelona when he did not want to go? Oh my God, that was painful. I mean, there was a man who basically the Barcelona fans are thinking, we must be in the stoop here if he's getting if he's leaving the building.
See one I remember as well, and it's got slightly forgotten, is Ryan Christie after Serbia.
Well, brilliant.
And I thought to
After the
myself,
qualification.
it was a very emotional time because it was during lockdown. It was the first time I'd like, it was a thing that united us all. We were all sitting in different rooms and that, and it was just this wonderful Scottish story. At last, not only have we qualified, we won it by a penalty shootout. We've actually done
After losing a late equaliser. Aye.
But this is not the way we usually do things. And what I loved about it is that you always hear people saying very lazily, "Oh, they don't care about playing with that. They just want their deals. They want their, they want their boot deals. If they've got their big..." And you watch Christie that night and you went,
Yeah,
he's just one of us.
And of course, Pelé winning the World Cup at 17, is just outrageous. 17 years of age, and
What were you doing at 17?
do you know what?
I was going to say, what was he doing at the final?
And by the way, being not just winning at 17 as a journeyman, being the main man in the team.
No, and this is the other
team
thing
that's got
about it.
Zagallo and Dida and
And
Winchell.
I hate to be I feel as if I'm the old fuddy-duddy with this, but people will turn and go, wait a minute, he was in a great team, and I'm thinking to myself, how the fuck do you get into that team? I mean, honestly, that's what I think to myself. He's 17. They're all world-class players, and he's in. I mean, give me peace. Ronaldo couldn't do that. Messi couldn't do that. Maradona couldn't do that.
It was the Pelé story, and we're going to go on to Ronaldo and the 1,000 goals. The Pelé story is just extraordinary. I mean, and that great stat you came up with the other week there, and I love all that stuff, but that stat, 9 Santos players were World Cup winners.
I mean, honestly, to get into the team at 17, it's crazy. And it brings me nicely to Ronaldo, because Ronaldo cried when Greece won the 2004 final. My God, I think he thought, I'm never going to see there. I'm not going to get to the mountaintop again, and especially in their own backyard. I mean, that's painful, Graham, isn't it?
Yeah, and I remember him crying after the last World Cup when he got put in. He was on the bench, wasn't he? And I've got to say, though, that I'm a Messi fanboy, so it's interesting we're talking about tears inspiring warmth for people. I just thought, yes.
well, I know that's
Neymar.
for
the exact same thing.
Neymar's cried as well. But I would say this to you, and I'm going to be hugely unpopular. I'm a Messi man. I love Messi. He's a fabulous player. I still think Pellé's the greatest ever player. And we could do an entire programme on it, which we probably undoubtedly will. But to finish, I'm going to finish on Ronaldo, and might be very unpopular in this opinion. Ronaldo, I'll give you the quotes that he's come out with. He's 40, right? And he's still playing, and he's 77 goals short of 1,000 goals. And by the way...
all of them on video.
Yes, and 1,000 goals by...
A few of them in Saudi as well, though.
Well, of course, a few of them in the Saudi, just as Messi's are in the MLS, but and just
MLS
as Pellé's goals were in friendlies, some of them, But 1,000 goals, the majority of them in top leagues, to win top tournaments. That's the first thing. But his lines are, and these are fantastic. This is why people don't like him. But I love him, because I just think the bravado of it. I've had some really bad coaches. Some of them don't have a clue about football. And then he says, if I finish on 920 goals or 925 goals, it doesn't matter at all. I am the best in history, period. Right? So there's his line. And he then goes on to say,
modest.
I'm the most complete player ever. You may prefer Pelé, Messi, Maradona. I understand and respect that, but I am the best player ever. I'm fast, strong. I score with my head, with my left foot, obviously with his right as well. No one has ever been more complete than me. Well, I'll give you a history lesson. Pelé was scoring them with the head, the left foot and the right foot long before any of these guys were born. But I looked at his... I mean, honestly, I think as time goes on, and people forget the arrogance of it, I think he's top 5, but I think he's in the conversation.
Oh, absolutely.
Because he's won the awards. I couldn't even, if I had to rhyme it off, the programme would be finished.
The other thing about him is, I think his greatest thing about him is the way he dragged teams over the line. He could, I know with Portugal when they won the Euros, he was injured and came off after 20 minutes. But all through his life, he dragged teams over the line. I thought it was really interesting when he was at Juventus, when the Juventus players like Cellini, etc., who were real kind of tough guys, and that, they all said, no, he's the best we've ever seen, because he would find a way for us to get over the line. I think the whole thing about greatest player of all time is tremendous, right? Because it's a pub argument, and if properly applied, it's a great argument, because you bring out good parts and bad parts of players. You know, I always love like the great Tam McManus one, when Messi wins the World Cup and Tam says, "That's it, the debate's over. Messi is the best player in the World Cup," and I just put in the thank goodness for that, because that's what this argument might go on forever.
Mention this ever again.
It might go on forevermore, and now we're never going to have arguments about this. You know, so I love the arguments, because you can pick small holes, and they've got to be very small holes with everybody. But I always liked. I had 2 encounters with Ronaldo. When he used to send us down to Manchester United games regularly, in the Herald, just to go down, and they might be in the same group as Celtic or Rangers or something. You went down, and it was great, because you got interviews with everybody. And
Days are long gone.
I always remember you would go into the hospitality bit to get your plate of soup before the game, and I always remember this walking up to this guy, and I said, "It's a long way for Dens Park, isn't it?" And he said, "Oh, yes, yes." And it was Fabio, it was a Ravanelli. You know, so you're getting interviews, because he would sit down and say, "Yes, I'll give you an interview." Anyway, and I had 2 encounters with Ronaldo, and both of them I thought, "I just love you, because you are full of yourself."
Yes.
And I love that, because you got to be arrogant. But he was also very polite as well. He was full of himself, but polite, you know.
Do you know what was great about him, Graham? Apart from I think he may well have a claim to be the greatest ever. You know, for an argument, as time goes on and generations move on with it and look back at his stats. But one of the things that I think he deserves tremendous credit for, remember, this boy was a 7 and moved to a 9 at Real Madrid. You know, I mean, he started out as a 7 with the flicks and tricks and the step overs and everything, still scored great goals. And then suddenly at Real Madrid he's a 9, and then he just went on to another planet scoring goals. And then the awards, the Ballon d'Ors. I mean, you know, the Champions Leagues that he's won, it was just incredible.
I think like what he says there, one of the quotes I do maybe agree with him on. I know Pele's a complete player, and probably the most ever. It's probably a generational thing, but I can get more on board with the most complete player of all time than the best player, because I think it's 2 separate things. I think he's got a broader skill set maybe than a Messi, who can't header the ball and he's not going to track back and he's not going to do anything like that. And I think Ronaldo deserves unbelievable credit for the way he manufactured himself, and just through hard work and sheer, but obviously the talent as well, but the 2 married together, he turned himself from one of the best wingers in the world to one of the best strikers in the world. I think unbelievable. Whereas Messi was eating pizzas after games and just had the natural ability, you know. But I think
nothing wrong with having a pizza after the game.
No, absolutely not. No, but that's why I play Sunday League, you know.
I've been known to have a pizza during
the game, man.
Just wondering about the snobbery there.
Sorry about that, but
Deep fried.
no, you know what I'm saying. So, but for Messi, for me, the best player is a different thing. I look at a player and I just think, who brings you the most joy? And Messi's the only player that I've ever watched that has got me off the couch when I don't have an allegiance to him. So I watched Messi scored a goal against Betis, I think, if you remember, a few years ago, where he chips the goalie from this impossible angle, and the whole stadium is applauding him. And I was up off the couch. I couldn't believe what I was watching.
Yes. Yeah.
I've never had that with Ronaldo, maybe the overhead kick.
To be fair, he actually went head to head with Ronaldo at one point in La Liga, and they were hitting 40 and 50 goals each, and they were breaking records week in, week out. You know, it's not as if we're putting him in just for joy. He went head to head with him, and of course he's won the World Cup. It's a great argument, but I think somewhere along the line, once people forget about this real arrogance, Ali, I think he might have a right good shout when people look back and he hangs up his boots
Of course he will. Of course he will. When you just look at his stats, I think, you know, we've had this conversation often. Who's the best, Messi or Ronaldo? Who do you like? Like, I sometimes think when time moves on, you'll appreciate the fact that you watched football when both of them were playing. You were privileged to watch two great exponents of their art at their peak. It's a pleasure to watch, and you can nitpick over who was the best and whatever. I think Messi will win it for his. He came across, rightly or wrongly, like people liked him better than Ronaldo. Ronaldo's demeanour and arrogance probably shunned a lot of people or put people off him. But I think when in a decade's time, when neither of them are playing, you'll be privileged at the fact that you saw both of them in the flesh.
Oh, that was a joy for us, and I was lucky enough to see Pelé play.
So I saw Pelé as well.
And I'm just going to say to you, the last word on this with you, Hugh, as time fades, people forget the enormity and the impact of players like Pelé, and they may well forget as time fades the impact that Maradona had on a tiny place that felt oppressed, forgotten, felt as if they were like the bottom of the shoe.
Napoli for me is what makes Maradona. The way that makes Alex Ferguson the greatest manager of all time for me is Aberdeen. Right, what you did at Aberdeen.
Yeah.
And Maradona in Naples. Maradona takes a team to win 2 Scudetto. I've never won it before and never won it since until a couple of seasons ago.
Yes.
And that suggests, wait a wee minute. And my other line was, if you look at the 1986 Argentina team and you look at the 1986 Scotland team, and I'm not exaggerating here, if you'd put Maradona into the Scotland team, I think we probably could have won the World Cup. And people go, what? How could you win the World Cup? If you know the players that were in that team, we had Miller, we had Souness, we had Nicholas. I mean, Aitken, we had good players in that team.
Yeah.
And I think Maradona would almost have won that World Cup with any team in the World Cup.
And that we needed Ruffy to go over to Buenos Aires in the 60s and meet Mrs. Maradona to give us that chance. We needed that, and it didn't quite materialise.
It would have.
That's an idea for a shot at glory, and you've part 2.
Yes, to be fair, if we'd won the World Cup, I think as a nation we'd be the most unbearable nation of all time.
Pretty close to that.
People going about 66, and you're like, what do you think we would be like? You know what I mean?
We're on about a friendly in 67. We're still talking about. I've got T-shirts about it. But anyway, an absolute joy and great to have you in, Graham. I love the chat as well. Hugh McDonald and Alison McConnell on the Journos. If you do like the programme and you like it as a podcast, keep downloading it. Hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Thank you for listening and watching today.